So in our work in the Torrey Honors Institute, we have students come in and they pretty much think they know how the world works. They've got all sorts of convictions, things are black and white, and they've got a settled collection of beliefs. Janelle, from what I understand, you're pretty sure that it's important for them to doubt a bunch of those things in the process of their education. Can you talk about the role of doubt in education?
Sure. So I mean, this is the concept that goes all the way back to Socrates, the way that Socrates would encounter people in the Greek marketplace. He would start with a person who had a pretty sure feeling that they knew what something like virtue was. And he started asking them questions. He started saying, oh, but how does that work? And expose ways that they hadn't thought very clearly about the thing that they thought they understood. And that was actually, so that's called aporia in Greek. That's actually the moment where a person realizes that what they thought they understood really well, they actually only had a pretty surface understanding of. Socrates thinks that that's the first moment of learning. At that moment where you go, oh no, I thought I knew this and I don't. That's the moment where suddenly you become open to the process of being educated. You become open to hearing a different perspective or thinking about your view more carefully than you had before.
And Fred, you teach Socratically too, but I think that you're disagreeing with Janelle here. You think there's a problem with this?
I'm a little more concerned about the corrosive effect of doubt as a universal solvent. So when you let that cat out of the bag, I'm switching metaphors here.
The cat that solves the problem by
corrosive cat.
The corrosive cat. I don't know what that
cats are. I just let's clarify.
Maybe I'm more anxious about what that cat's going to do.
Sure. Yeah, I do think that it's very important to think about the way in which doubt does affect a student affectively as well as intellectually, right? So we get this whole process in early modern philosophy where the solution is doubt. Descartes says all we have to do is doubt everything, we'll get certainty, it'll be awesome.
We'll do that by 2 o'clock.
Right, exactly, yeah. And it only takes about 100 years to get to somebody like David Hume, who's experiencing doubt as so corrosive that things like gravity become difficult to believe in, laws in general.
So I'm thinking of students who fast track that whole century-long experience into about 2 weeks, and they show up for office hours, and you can tell, almost by their posture, that they're experiencing epistemological vertigo.
Yeah.
And you say, like, have a seat, and they say, how do I know there is a seat?
Right. It might not be there.
Could that be a good moment, this vertigo?
Well, it all depends on how you handle it, and it all depends on how they handle it personally.
So you as a teacher, they as a student.
Exactly, because there are students who, frankly, I think there are students who want that kind of drama in their life, who are actually excited about the vertigo of realizing that they've done something really impressive intellectually. Kierkegaard talks about this. He's in a generation that's post-Hume, that's really frustrated. He's really frustrated with the way that people think doubting is the deep thing to do. And I think there are students who really find that appealing. So one thing I don't want to do as a Socratic teacher is say, like, yeah, now you're in the club. Now you've understood what we all have seen, right? Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to come back to the place where we've understood that we didn't understand, but now are on the path to understanding again. So there's got to be hope mixed in with the doubt in any of these moments, where students simultaneously understand that they don't believe the way they thought they did, but also have hope that if they work and if they pray and if they continue to pursue truth, that they'll actually make progress.
Well, so let's slide this into this old maxim that Augustine would say it, Anselm would say it. It's that faith seeks understanding. Now, I could see how faith doubts at times, but it also strikes me as problematic if faith is going to constantly call faith's own convictions into question in its seeking of understanding. So how does doubt fit into that paradigm of faith seeking understanding?
Yeah.
When you use a biblical word like faith, and I assume in the biblical sense, since you're a theologian and all, it is interesting that the Bible doesn't often speak the kind of Socratic language we're speaking. Just in terms of the things it says about faith, faith seems to be a species of knowledge, right? It's not sight, but it's a way of apprehending what is true.
Right.
Non-comprehensive knowledge, that seems to be part of the point of faith, is that it's not sight, and therefore there's a
Mm-hmm.
groping component to it. There's the requirement of hope because one hasn't arrived.
Yeah, I think that's really important to keep in mind. I think when we think about faith, one of the things that is true of faith is a posture of dependence. So one of the things that goes wrong in early modern Cartesian kind of philosophy is that we've got this assumption that if we do it right, we can get to a point where our knowledge isn't dependent on God's faithfulness to us. And a number of Christian thinkers are going to push back on that and say, no, actually, one of the things that faith involves is us believing that our reason, our ability to get to these certainties on our own is actually pretty limited. That what we need is something like revelation, and what we need is something like the Spirit to come in and support us when we're not able to support ourselves. And sometimes the process of ushering a student into doubt is ushering a student into a place where they realize that they actually are dependent on God for their certainty. That their certainty isn't something that they can do on their own just by thinking hard.
Can I ask about that language, ushering a student into doubt? Because it conjures the image of students come in, everything's fine, and you say, but is it so? Which is sort of like,
Welcome into doubt.
right. I am Professor Serpent in the Garden, and I am asking the first question.
Right.
Has God said?
Right.
What about that notion that they come in fine and we provoke them?
Well, if they came in fine, I think it would be different. If they're coming in with a sort of a gloss of catchphrases that ultimately aren't going to stand up to real questions, I'm not sure that is being fine. And I think especially if we're thinking about university as a time to prepare students to be in a world that's going to be asking them a lot of hard questions.
So that's the thing. They seem fine, but we have reason to believe a lot of them are not. Right? They're from good churches and homes, and they have high SATs, but all is not actually well.
Right. And even if all is well in the sense that, so we're going to come back around to the beginning, and it's going to turn out that Jesus does love us, and we do know it because the Bible told us so, right? Those are all going to end up being true. But sometimes the process of getting to the point where we've really affectively and cognitively worked our way around to that belief is more difficult than you'd think. It's not just a memorization, it's actually a cognitive process of coming to that kind of belief.
Well, and I wonder whether the real question here isn't so much. Sometimes there's a reason to ask, is it so?
Right.
I think more often it's as productive, and I think gets the things you want, to ask something like, what do you mean?
Right.
So you don't always have to ask, well, does Jesus really love you? But you could say something like, what do you mean? So you say Jesus loves you.
Right.
It's not, is that true? It's, what does that, what do you mean by what you're saying?
I don't think you know what it means as well as you think.
Sure.
And so we can still get all of these, all of the sort of stirring up the questions without asking the constant question of, can you even verify the reality?
Which
so
turns out to be a pretty unhelpful question a lot of the time, right? Like, does Jesus really love you? Well, how does that help us? But what does that mean for Christ to love me? Where is Christ? How is he impacting me? How do I experience that? Those are the kind of questions that deepen that concept and make it really valuable.
And I think it's reassurance. So I think you can take away some of the vertigo by saying something like, look, I'm going to agree with you. I think Jesus loves you, Fred. But I don't think you know what it means.
Right.
So let's get at it so that you can have a deeper understanding, so we can frame it, I think, a bit for students that way.
The Torrey Honors Institute at Biola University. Biblically centered, great books, liberal education. More at biola.edu/Torrey.